How does a simple medical donation appointment turn into security walking toward me like I did something wrong? Why would a doctor look at my labs and say my DNA is flagged in a federal database and that I should not exist? What happens when federal agents say my birth year is not mine, and a wealthy family case is tied to my name? My name is Grant. I am 43 years old. I used to own a small business, and I used to think I understood how life worked. If I showed up early, did good work, paid people on time, and kept my word, I thought respect would follow. I thought effort was like a receipt. You put it down on the counter, and the world had to honor it. That is not how it went for me. By the time this started, my business was gone. My marriage was gone too. I was not standing in my old office anymore. I was standing in a basement studio apartment that smelled like old paint and wet concrete. The ceiling was low enough that I could touch it with my palm. The window was small and faced a brick wall. When a car passed outside, the light changed for 1 second and then went dull again. I kept my things neat. It was the one part of my life I could still control. My shoes were lined up. My shirts were folded. My mail was stacked in a clean pile, even though most of it made my stomach tighten. Late notices, polite warnings, a letter that said my phone service would be limited if I did not pay by a certain date. I read each one like a calm person, but my body reacted like it was under a weight. I was careful with money in a way I had never been before. I counted bills twice. I wrote numbers down on a notepad: rent, bus fare, groceries, laundry, a little for the phone. That was it. There was no room for mistakes. There was no room for pride. People talk about losing everything like it is one big moment. For me, it was smaller. It was a long series of ordinary moments that trained me to expect less. I would walk into a store and watch the clerk look past me. I would ask a simple question and hear the answer come back sharp and short, like I should already know. I would stand in line and feel the person behind me breathe too close, as if my space did not count. I was not loud. I did not demand attention. In the past, I thought that was a strength. I thought calm meant stable. Now I could see how many people read calm as weak. The worst part was how quickly the world rewrote who I was. When I had a business, people called me reliable. When I lost it, people called me unlucky, then careless, then they stopped calling at all. When I was married, people said I was steady. When I was not, people acted like I had been a temporary option that finally expired. I did not hear these words directly at first. I felt them in the way faces turned away, in the way messages got shorter, in the way silence became normal. That week, I had a day that made everything feel smaller. I woke up to a message from my landlord reminding me about rent. The tone was polite, but the meaning was clear. I walked to the nearest corner store and used a card that had just enough balance for bread and soup. The machine took a long time to approve. The cashier watched me like I was doing something wrong. I kept my hands still and my voice even. I thanked him anyway. Outside, the wind was hard and dry. It found the gaps in my coat. I walked back down the block and saw a group of people near a cafe, laughing, holding warm cups, looking clean and unbothered. None of them looked like me. I told myself that was just a story my mind was making. Still, it sat in my chest. That afternoon, I sat at the small desk in my apartment and stared at my notepad. I had written the numbers again. I did it slowly, like slow writing could change math. I was short, not a little short, not skip coffee short. I was something has to happen now short. I had heard about medical donation programs from a man I used to work with. He told me it was simple. You sign up, you do screening, you show you are healthy, and they pay you for your time. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to stop the bleeding for a moment. I had always avoided it before because I did not like the idea of being measured like a product. But I was out of soft options. I looked it up on my phone with the last of my data. The website was bright and cheerful. It used words like support, community, and reward. It promised up to $1,000 for qualified participants. $1,000 was not a gift. It was air. It was rent. It was groceries that did not come from the cheapest shelf. It was time. I told myself I would treat it like any other appointment. I would show up clean, on time, and respectful. I would answer questions. I would not let my pride speak for me. Pride did not pay bills. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. I shaved carefully. I ironed my only decent shirt with a towel and a mug of hot water. I checked my wallet and made sure my ID was there. I packed a small bottle of water and a snack because the website said it might be a long visit. I walked to the bus stop while the sky was still pale. The streetlights buzzed. The air smelled like cold metal. A man in a heavy jacket stood near the bench and watched the road, his hands deep in his pockets. A woman with earbuds stared at her phone and did not look up. I stood a little apart and focused on breathing slow. When the bus arrived, it sighed at the curb. I got on and sat near the middle. The bus was warm in a tired way. The seats were scratched. The windows had smudges from hands. I watched neighborhoods slide past, each one like a different world. Some streets had clean sidewalks and trees. Some had boarded windows and broken signs. The city did not hide its uneven edges. The clinic was in a building that looked newer than everything around it. The sign was neat. The doors opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant, and something sweet meant to cover it. The lighting was bright and flat. It made every flaw on every face look sharper. I approached the front desk and waited until the receptionist looked up. She was young, with a headset and a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. She asked for my name and ID. Her voice was not rude, but it was not warm either. It was the voice of someone dealing with a line of tasks. I gave her my ID. She glanced at it and typed quickly. She asked me to confirm my address. When I answered, her eyebrows lifted a little like she had just placed me into a category. She asked if I had done this program before. I said no. She nodded once and handed me a clipboard. The forms were thick. They asked about everything: my health history, my medications, my work, my habits, places I had lived, places I had traveled. Every question felt like it carried a hidden judgment. I sat in a row of chairs and filled them out with careful printing. I wanted my handwriting to look steady. I wanted my answers to look honest and boring. The waiting room had a TV playing a morning talk show with the volume low. There was a water dispenser in the corner and a stack of cups. A poster on the wall showed smiling people in clean clothes with a line about helping research and being compensated. Another poster explained rules about punctuality, honesty, and behavior. It reminded me of employee handbooks I used to write for my staff. The tone was friendly, but the meaning was strict. Other people came in and out. Some looked like they were doing this as a side thing, the way people do a gym membership. They wore brand shoes and carried large insulated bottles. Some looked tired, like me. They sat quietly and avoided eye contact. I could tell who was there for extra money and who was there because they needed it. I kept my face neutral. I kept my shoulders relaxed. I sat straight and waited. After a while, the receptionist called my name. She did not say it with any extra tone. She just said it, like reading a label. I stood and walked to the desk. She asked for the forms and looked them over. Her eyes moved fast. She paused once, then asked me to sign a line again because my signature did not match the sample on my ID exactly. I signed again. I wrote my name slowly, the way I did on bank documents. She took my ID and the forms and said she needed to check something in the system. Then she stood up and walked through a door behind the desk. It was a small moment, but it felt like a spotlight. My ID was in her hand. She did not leave it on the desk. She carried it with her like it was sensitive. I watched her disappear into the back hallway. I saw another staff member glance at her and then glance at me. It lasted 1 second, but it was enough to tighten my throat. I sat back down. I tried not to stare. I tried to be the easiest person in the room. That is what you learn when you do not have power. You learn to be low friction. You learn to make yourself smaller without moving. A man across from me tapped his foot. A woman scrolled through her phone and smiled at something, then looked up and saw me looking in her direction. Her smile faded. She turned away. I told myself she was not thinking about me. Still, it landed like a small push. I thought about how my life used to be. I used to walk into meetings and have people stand up to greet me. I used to have a schedule full of calls. I used to have keys to doors and drawers, a name on a sign, and a desk that did not fold up. Now I was sitting in a clinic lobby, waiting for someone to decide if I was acceptable for a program meant to pay people for their time. I did not feel anger. I felt something colder. I felt the sharp awareness of how easily a person can be treated like a problem when they are not useful to the right people. I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand moved with a steady tick. 5 minutes passed, then 10. People were called back, one by one, names I did not know. I stayed in my chair. I stood once to get a cup of water. The dispenser made a loud gurgle that sounded too big for the quiet room. I drank slowly and sat again. When the receptionist finally came back, her smile was gone. She did not look at me right away. She returned to her chair and typed. She picked up the phone, listened, then set it down. Then she looked toward the back hallway, as if waiting for someone. I lowered my eyes to my hands. I kept them still on my lap. I told myself not to imagine stories. I told myself there could be a normal reason. A slow computer, a missing field, a routine check. But I knew the feeling in the room had changed. It was subtle, but it was real. Staff were moving with more purpose. One person walked by the waiting area and looked at me, then looked away quickly. Another staff member spoke quietly to the receptionist and nodded once. I sat there, calm on the outside, and tried to understand what I had walked into. I had come for a simple program and a simple payment. I had come to solve a short-term problem. I had not come to be watched. I told myself to keep breathing. I told myself to stay respectful. I told myself that whatever this was, I would handle it the right way, the way calm people handle things. So I sat in that bright lobby, under posters about rules and rewards, while my ID was somewhere behind a closed door, and I waited. I sat there and tried to act normal, but my mind kept moving. When you are treated like a problem, you start replaying your life like a list. You ask yourself when it began. You ask yourself what you missed. You ask yourself why people feel so comfortable pushing you aside. I did not always live like this. I did not always count coins and watch my phone battery like it was food. I had a business for almost 15 years. It was not famous, but it was real. We built and repaired industrial control systems for small factories and warehouses. It was wires, cabinets, sensors, and long days. It was also relationships. When a line stopped, someone called me. When we solved it, that line ran again. I liked that. I liked clear problems and clear results. I started it alone. I did the work during the day and invoices at night. In the early years, I drove an old van and kept tools in milk crates. I learned to speak calmly even when a client was upset. I learned to say yes, and then do the hard part of making yes possible. That business gave me a kind of identity. I was the steady one. I was the man who showed up. I did not talk big. I did not post about my life. I worked. I met Elena when the business was finally stable. I was in my early 30s. She was a little younger than me. She worked in event planning at the time. We met at a small business networking dinner. I was there because someone told me it was good for growth. She was there because it was her job. We talked at a table near the back. She laughed easily and she asked questions that made me feel like I was seen. At first, Elena liked that I was calm. She said loud people were tiring. She said she wanted peace. She liked that I listened. She liked that I did not show off. When we started living together, she said my home felt safe. I believed that. I built my life around that belief. A few years later, Ronan entered the picture. He was a sales type, always polished, always moving. He came to me through a mutual contact who said Ronan could bring bigger clients. Ronan talked about vision and growth. He said my work was solid, but my reach was small. He said I was leaving money on the table. I was careful at first. I did not trust smooth words, but I was also tired. I was working too many hours. I was missing dinners. I was answering calls on weekends. Ronan offered a deal that sounded fair. He would handle business development and client relationships. I would handle the technical side and delivery. We would split profit in a way that matched the effort. I said yes because I thought a partnership could make life lighter. At the same time, Elena's world started changing. She moved from small events to bigger ones, more corporate work, more high-end spaces, more people who cared about image. She started talking about how things looked from the outside. She talked about the right car, the right neighborhood, the right friends. I tried to keep up. Not in a flashy way, but in a steady way. I upgraded the van when it was truly needed. I took Elena to nicer places on anniversaries. I wore a jacket to events, even though I felt stiff in it. I told myself it was normal for a marriage to grow and change. But slowly, the tone shifted. It was not one big argument. It was 1,000 small corrections. Elena would adjust my shirt collar in front of other people like I was a child who did not know how to dress. She would correct the way I told a story, even when the details did not matter. If I used a simple word, she would replace it with a fancier one. She would laugh, but it was not kind laughter. It was the kind that made the people around us look at me like I was behind. I would smile and let it go. I did not want to fight at parties. I did not want to be the man who ruined the mood. I told myself it was better to stay calm. Ronan noticed this dynamic. He leaned into it. When we met clients, Ronan would lead the conversation. That was expected. But then he started speaking as if I was not a partner. He would say things like, I was his technical guy. He would introduce me by my first name and then keep talking before I could add anything. When a client asked a question, Ronan would answer even if it was technical, and then look at me like he wanted me to confirm his words, like a worker confirming a supervisor. I did not correct him in front of clients. I told myself it was not worth it. I told myself results mattered more than titles. But the pattern grew. At home, Elena began treating my work like an inconvenience, not a contribution. If I had to leave early for an emergency call, she would sigh and say her friends had partners who did not live at the mercy of other people's problems. If I came home late and tired, she would say she felt alone, even though I was working to pay for our life. I tried to explain. I said the business was the foundation. I said stability came from showing up. I said this was how I kept our house running. Elena would nod, but her eyes would drift away, like she was already thinking about something else. Then came the little social cuts. There was a dinner at a restaurant with some of Elena's work friends. They talked about travel, brands, and networking. I listened and spoke when I was asked. One man asked what I did. I explained it in simple terms. He smiled in a polite way and then turned his body slightly away from me. Elena jumped in and summarized my job for him like I was not there. She made it sound smaller than it was, like I changed light bulbs and reset routers. I kept my face neutral. I drank water. I told myself it did not matter. But it did matter. It mattered because it trained people to see me that way. Ronan also started hosting planning meetings without me. He would say it was easier, just a quick chat. Then later he would tell me what was decided. It was always framed as efficient. It was always framed as progress. If I questioned it, he would say I was being sensitive and that this was how growth worked. I felt pressure from both sides. Elena wanted a lifestyle that required more money and more social standing. Ronan wanted more control and more credit. And I was the one in the middle, building the actual work and carrying the actual risk. I also began to notice how people spoke about me when they thought I was not listening. At a charity event, Elena was speaking to a group near the bar area. I walked up with 2 drinks and heard her say I was very steady and very safe. She said it like a compliment, but the group reacted like she had described a piece of furniture. They smiled at her. One woman patted Elena's arm as if Elena had made a practical choice rather than a human one. I handed Elena her drink, and she thanked me with a bright smile that was meant for the room. Then she went right back to her conversation without including me. I stood there with my drink and felt like I had become a background object in my own life. The business side got worse in the same quiet way. A client called one afternoon with a serious issue. Their main line was stopping at random. It was costing them money. I went out, found the fault, and fixed it. I stayed late to test it. The next day, Ronan forwarded me an email thread where the client praised Ronan's team for the fast work. My name was not in it. Ronan replied with a cheerful message, taking the praise as if it was his hands on the equipment. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I went back to work. That is what I did. I worked. Later, Ronan began asking me to sign things without explaining details. He said it was standard. He said it was just a formality. He said it was needed for a vendor account or a lease update. I asked questions, and he said I was slowing things down. I did not like it. I started keeping my own notes, not because I wanted a fight, but because I could feel the ground shifting under my feet. I began saving copies of emails in a folder at home. I began writing down dates of key decisions. I did it quietly. I did not mention it to anyone. At home, Elena started measuring me against people who were louder. She did not say it directly at first. She would say things like, she admired confidence. She would say she liked a man who could take charge of a room. She would say some couples looked like a power pair. I would say I was not there to perform. I would say I was there to build a stable life. Elena would smile and say stability was nice, but she wanted more than nice. Then one night, she said something that stayed with me. We were in the kitchen. The light above the sink made everything look pale. She said she felt like she had outgrown our life. She said she did not want to be limited by my comfort level. She said I seemed content to stay small. I told her I was not content. I told her I was working. I told her I was trying to keep us safe. Elena said safety was not the same as living. I did not raise my voice. I asked her what she wanted. She said she wanted a partner who matched her energy. She said she wanted someone who could move fast. She said she did not want to feel like she was dragging me into the future. I remember nodding. I remember telling her I understood. I remember standing there and feeling like she was describing someone else, not me. A few months later, at a local business mixer, Ronan crossed a line in public. We were standing in a circle with potential clients and a few community people. Someone asked how long Ronan and I had worked together. Ronan laughed and said he had brought the structure and I had brought the technical work. Then he said something like, I was great at following direction. People chuckled politely. I smiled because I did not want to look upset. But inside, something changed shape. It was not anger. It was clarity. I saw the pattern in one clean picture. Elena was turning me into a stable background. Ronan was turning me into a worker in my own business. And everyone around us was accepting that story because it was easier than questioning it. I did not confront them that night. I went home. I wrote the date down. I wrote what was said. I placed the note in my folder. That is what I did in those years. I stayed calm. I watched. I recorded the truth in small, quiet ways. Now, sitting in a clinic lobby with my ID behind a closed door, I felt that same old clarity rising again. The world had pushed me aside before. People had rewritten my role before, and I had learned, the hard way, that calm is only useful if it is paired with action. The next morning, I went back to the clinic because they asked me to return. The message was short and careful. It did not explain anything. It only said they needed to complete a follow-up step from my screening. I took the same bus route. I sat in the same kind of seat and watched the same blocks pass by. But it felt different this time. When you think you are going somewhere normal, your body stays loose. When you think you are walking into a problem, your body starts bracing without permission. At the entrance, the doors opened with the same soft hiss. The same bright lighting hit my face. The smell was the same too, clean and sharp. But the staff moved differently. They looked up faster when I approached. The receptionist asked for my name again, even though she had already seen my face the day before. She asked for my ID again. I handed it over and kept my hands visible. I did not want to look defensive. I did not want to look like I was hiding anything. She typed for a long time. She did not chat. She did not smile. She finally said someone would come get me. I sat in the waiting area, and I felt eyes on me in a way I had not felt before, not from other donors, from staff. It was quick glances, then looking away. It was a person stepping into the hall and then stepping back. It was a quiet coordination that did not include me. A man in a polo shirt with a lanyard stood near the hallway entrance. He was not wearing medical gloves. He was not carrying a clipboard. He looked like someone whose job was to stand where he stood. He did not do anything dramatic. He only watched the room like he was counting exits. I kept my posture neutral. I looked at the posters again. Rules, punctuality, honesty, behavior. I had built policies like that in my business. I knew how they were written. They were meant to sound friendly while leaving no room for argument. After a few minutes, a nurse called my name. Her voice was calm. Her face was blank in a professional way. She walked me down the hallway without small talk. She led me into an exam room and asked me to sit. The room was clean and plain. Paper on the exam table, a sink in the corner, cabinets with labels, a small screen on the wall. It looked like any other exam room, but the air felt tighter. She took my blood pressure and temperature. Her hands were steady. Her questions were routine. Then she said the doctor would be in shortly. I waited alone. I listened to footsteps in the hallway. I heard a door open and close. I heard low voices that stopped when someone passed. When Dr. Keene entered, I recognized him from the day before. He looked tired in a controlled way, like someone who had been awake too long but could not show it. He greeted me politely and sat at a small workstation. He looked at the screen for a long time without speaking. Then he asked me to confirm my full name, my date of birth, and my current address. The questions were normal, but the way he asked them was not. He asked like he needed exact wording. I answered calmly. I told him the same information I had told the receptionist. He nodded and asked if I had ever used a different name. I said no. He asked if I had ever had issues with my identity records. I told him not that I knew of. I said I had always used the same ID. I said I had filed taxes, paid bills, and worked in my name like anyone else. He listened without interrupting. Then he took a breath and chose his words carefully. He said the lab system had produced a flag connected to my sample. He said the clinic could not ignore it. He said it was not a diagnosis, and it was not a medical problem in the usual sense. He said it was an identity verification issue connected to external databases used for safety and compliance. I asked him what that meant for me today. I asked if I was still eligible for the program and the payment. He said he could not complete the donation process until the flag was cleared. He said it would be irresponsible to proceed. He also said the clinic had to follow protocol. He said that was why I was brought back. I asked what the flag said. He did not answer directly. He said he was not allowed to give me details from systems that were not owned by the clinic. He said it would be handled by the appropriate channels. The phrase appropriate channels sounded cold. It sounded like a door closing without a slam. I asked him if I was in trouble. Dr. Keene looked at me for a moment. His expression softened slightly, like he could tell I was trying hard not to react. He said he was not accusing me of anything. He said he did not know the story behind the flag. He said his job was to keep the clinic within regulations and keep everyone safe. Then he said something else that made my throat tighten. He said the system did not treat the flag like a small error. He said it treated it like a high-priority mismatch. He said it might be a simple mistake, but the system did not assume that. He said that was why clinic security was present in the building today. He did not point. He did not need to. I had already noticed the man in the hallway. I kept my voice low and steady. I said I understood. I said I would cooperate. I said I just wanted to know what would happen next. Dr. Keene said someone would contact me to schedule verification steps. He said I might be asked to provide additional documents or answer additional questions. He said he recommended that I remain calm and not try to fix it on my own by calling random numbers. He said the process had to be handled in order. I nodded. I told him I would do that. He asked if I had someone I trusted who could be available for support. I told him I had a friend I could call. He stood, and before he left, he looked at me again and said he was sorry for how this felt. He said he understood it was unsettling. He said he wanted me to remember that a system flag was not the same as a personal judgment. He said people made mistakes, and systems made mistakes too, but the clinic could not pretend it was not there. When he left, the nurse returned. She said she would walk me back to the lobby. In the hallway, the man with the lanyard was still there. He did not block me. He did not touch me. He only shifted slightly, so he was between me and the exit until the nurse passed. Then he moved aside. That small movement told me everything. It told me I had been placed into a category without being told the category name. At the front desk, the receptionist handed me a paper with a general clinic number and a note about follow-up contact. It did not explain why. It did not say what the flag was. It was written like the clinic wanted the interaction to be forgettable. I asked about the payment. The receptionist said payment was only for completed donation steps. She said I had not completed them. She said she was not authorized to override that. She said she was sorry. Her sorry sounded practiced, but I did not blame her. She was a person doing her job behind a counter. The bigger problem was that I was walking out of a program I needed with nothing in my pocket and a new kind of uncertainty pressing on me. I left the building and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Cars passed. People walked by with coffee cups and headphones. The world did not pause for me. I could feel a familiar sensation in my chest. It was the same sensation I used to feel when a big client delayed payment and I had payroll coming up. It was not panic. It was pressure paired with calculation. It was my mind trying to find control in a situation that was shifting. I walked to a coffee shop a few blocks away. It was not fancy. It was quiet. The kind of place where nobody asked questions if you sat in the corner. I ordered the cheapest drink on the menu and chose a table near the wall. My hands were steady, but my thoughts were not. I pulled out my phone and called Silas. Silas answered like he always did. His voice was calm. He did not fill the silence with noise. He listened. I told him the clinic had stopped the process. I told him they said my lab sample triggered an identity flag. I told him they were bringing in outside verification channels. I told him security was involved in a protocol way, not in a scene way. I told him I was not sure what any of it meant, but it did not feel small. Silas asked a few questions. He asked if anyone had accused me of anything directly. I told him no. He asked if they had given me paperwork explaining it. I told him they only gave me a general follow-up note. He told me to write down everything I remembered while it was fresh. He told me to note names, times, and wording as closely as I could. He said he was not trying to scare me, but he said systems only respect details. He said if I wanted to protect myself, I needed a clean timeline. That word timeline landed in my mind like a tool returning to my hand. I pulled out a small notebook I used for job searches and wrote the clinic date, the time, Dr. Keene's name, and the phrases I could remember. I wrote down that they said external databases. I wrote down that they said high priority mismatch. I wrote down that they said follow-up contact. When I finished, I stared at the page and felt the weight of my own name. I had carried it my whole life. I had signed it on contracts. I had written it on checks. I had put it on business cards. I had built something under it. Now, a system was hinting that my name and my records did not fit together the way they should. I left the coffee shop and went back to my apartment. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cooking oil. I unlocked my door and stepped into the low-ceiling room that had become my whole world. I sat at my desk and opened the drawer where I kept my folder. It was not a legal folder. It was not a dramatic folder. It was an ordinary folder where I put things I did not want to lose. Old receipts, old letters, a few photos, a copy of my ID, a copy of my business registration from years ago. At the bottom, beneath papers I had not touched in a long time, was a smaller envelope. It was worn at the edges. I had kept it because it was tied to my early childhood records. I had never studied it. I had always assumed it was normal. I held that envelope in my hands and realized something about myself. I had spent years letting other people tell my story. Elena told her friends I was safe and steady, like it was a small thing. Ronan told clients I followed direction like it was normal. I had accepted those versions because fighting them felt exhausting, but I could not accept a system telling me I did not fit my own records without looking closer. I did not open the envelope yet. I only placed it on the desk next to my notebook. I looked at it the way you look at a locked door when you hear a noise on the other side. You do not know what is there, but you know it matters. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my landlord. It said someone had called the building office asking to verify my residency. It said the landlord did not give out details, but he needed to know if there was any issue he should be aware of. I read the message twice. My hands stayed steady, but my mouth went dry. I set the phone down, sat back in my chair, and looked at the envelope again. I could feel that cold clarity from before, the same kind I felt when I realized Elena and Ronan were turning me into a background object. It was not rage. It was the quiet understanding that something had crossed a line, and I could not afford to stay passive anymore. So I wrote one more line in my notebook. I wrote that the verification had already reached my home. And then I sat in the quiet room and prepared myself to start sorting truth from story, one piece at a time. I did not sleep much after that message from my landlord. The room was quiet, but my mind was loud. Every time the building pipes made a sound, I pictured someone at the front door asking questions. I kept telling myself to stay calm. I kept telling myself that calm was not the same as doing nothing. In the morning, I made a list on my notepad. It was not a big plan. It was just steps. I wrote down what I knew for sure and what I did not know. I wrote down the clinic date. I wrote down the doctor's name. I wrote down the words he used about a system flag and external checks. Then I wrote down the landlord message and the time it came in. I also wrote one sentence to myself: do not guess, only confirm. That sentence became my rule. I called the clinic number they gave me. I kept my voice steady and polite. I asked what the next step was. The person on the phone did not explain much. They said the clinic was not the decision maker for the flag. They said another agency handled it. They said I should wait for a call. Waiting was the problem. Waiting had cost me too much in my life. Waiting was what I did when Elena slowly turned me into a background figure. Waiting was what I did when Ronan slowly took control of my business conversations. Waiting was what I did when I hoped things would improve without a clear change. So I decided to move inside the system instead of standing outside it. I went to the public library first because it was the one place I could sit for hours without being questioned. The library was warm and smelled like paper and cleaning spray. People kept their voices low. Nobody cared if you were rich or broke as long as you followed the rules. I signed in for a computer and opened a blank document. I titled it Timeline. Then I started writing in plain language, like I was explaining things to a stranger who needed facts. I wrote my full name. I wrote the birth date that was on my ID. I wrote my current address. Then I listed the clinic visit, the screening, the follow-up call, the second visit, and the landlord message. I left space under each entry to add details later. Then I added a second section called Life Records. Under it, I wrote things I could confirm: schools I attended, addresses I remembered, jobs I held, and years. I did not add feelings. I did not add opinions. I only added the kind of facts a clerk would want to see. When I was done, I saved it in a simple way. I emailed it to myself. I also printed one copy using the library printer. It cost a few coins. I watched the paper come out and felt a strange sense of relief, like something was real again. From the library, I walked to a community legal aid office. I had never gone there before. In my old life, I handled things privately. I hired professionals. I paid invoices. Now I was walking into a small office with worn chairs and a sign on the wall about patience. The waiting room was full. People sat close together. Some looked tired. Some looked angry. Some looked like they had been holding stress for years. I sat in the corner and kept my posture relaxed. I did not want attention. I wanted information. When it was my turn, a staff member brought me into a small room and asked what I needed. I explained that a clinic had flagged my identity based on a lab system, and that my landlord had received a verification call. I said I did not understand what it meant, and I wanted to respond the correct way. The staff member listened and asked a few questions. They asked if anyone had accused me of wrongdoing. I said no. They asked if I had any official notice in writing. I said not yet. They asked if I had a record of what happened, with dates. I said yes, and I showed my printed timeline. They nodded and told me something simple that matched my rule. They said I should not try to fight a system with emotion. They said I should stay organized, keep notes, and ask for official steps in writing when possible. They said identity issues move slowly, but they move better when the person stays consistent. They also said I should be careful about who I spoke to, because people sometimes try to take advantage of confusion. That last part landed hard, because I had already seen what people did when they sensed weakness. When I left the office, my phone buzzed. It was Elena. I stared at her name on the screen for a moment before I answered. I did not want to talk to her, but I also did not want her to imagine things based on silence. Silence had always been her space to rewrite me. I answered with a neutral tone. Elena asked how I was doing. Her voice sounded soft at first. Then she asked a question that did not match the softness. She asked if I had any meetings scheduled. She asked if I needed help with paperwork. She asked if there was anything she should know. I told her I was handling it. I told her I was following proper steps. I told her I was fine. Elena said she was only asking because she cared. Then she mentioned Ronan in a casual way, like it was normal to link him to my private problems. She said Ronan had heard I was dealing with something and wanted to check in. I did not ask how Ronan had heard. I already knew the answer. My life had been a small-town story for a long time. People talk. People make guesses. People build versions of you that fit their mood. I told Elena I appreciated the concern, but I did not need help from her or Ronan. I kept it short. Then I ended the call. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed slowly. It was not sadness. It was that cold clarity again. Elena did not call because she missed me. She called because she wanted to know what was happening. Ronan did not want to check in because he cared. He wanted to know if there was risk or opportunity. I walked back to the library and used the computer again. I looked up basic information about identity verification processes. I did not go deep. I did not chase rumors. I only looked for official pathways and general advice. I wrote down a few agency names and general office locations. I wrote down that many processes require appointments. I wrote down that everything tends to move through scheduled steps. Then I did something I had avoided for a long time. I went to a downtown federal building. It was not dramatic. It was not like a movie. It was a building with metal detectors and quiet lines. People stood with folders and tired faces. A guard directed people to the right counters. Signs on the wall told everyone what they could not bring inside. The air felt dry and controlled. I had scheduled a basic information visit, not a confrontation. I went to the front desk and explained that I had been told an external verification process might be involved. I said I wanted to confirm the right office to contact and the correct steps to take. The person at the desk did not treat me like a problem, which surprised me. They treated me like a file. That sounds cold, but it was better than judgment. A file can be handled with rules. A file can be corrected. A file can be moved through steps. They told me which office handled identity-related questions in general terms. They told me how to request an appointment. They told me to bring basic documents and to keep copies for myself. They also told me not to assume that a flag meant guilt. They said many flags are mismatches that require careful verification. I thanked them and left. Outside, the sun was low behind buildings. The streets were noisy, but inside me, something was getting quieter. Not because the problem was solved, because I had a path. That evening, I went back to my apartment and opened that worn envelope on my desk for the first time in years. I did it slowly. I did it with clean hands. I did it like I was opening evidence in my own life. Inside were old papers I barely remembered. Some were copies. Some were printed in old fonts. One page had notes in the margins, as if someone had corrected something long ago. I did not fully understand it yet, but I recognized one detail right away, a date that looked slightly off from what I had always assumed. My stomach tightened, but I did not panic. I copied the detail into my notebook without writing conclusions. I wrote it as a question instead of a claim. I wrote that it needed confirmation. Then I called Mara. Mara was not a close friend. She was a lawyer I had met years ago through business work. We were not the kind of people who chatted, but I knew she respected facts, and she respected calm. I told her I had an identity verification issue connected to a clinic flag. I told her it might involve external databases. I told her my landlord had already been contacted for verification. I asked her what the safest approach was. Mara listened and gave me a simple framework. She said I should keep a clean record and avoid emotional exchanges with people who might twist my words. She said I should ask for official notices and instructions in writing when possible. She said I should not hand over original documents unless required, and even then only through clear procedures. She also said that if any meeting was scheduled with institutional representatives, I should not attend alone if I could avoid it. I told her I understood. Before we ended the call, Mara asked one question that made me pause. She asked if there were any people in my life who might try to attach themselves to this situation for personal gain. She did not name Elena or Ronan. She did not need to. The question was clear. I told her yes. I told her I would keep distance. After that call, I sat at my desk and looked at my notebook. In the past, I let other people's confidence push me into silence. Elena's polished social voice, Ronan's smooth business voice. I had let them speak while I worked in the background. That habit was part of why I was here. But this situation was different. This situation was not about social image. It was about systems, records, and verification. It was about facts that did not care how charming someone was. So I did what I always did when I faced a complex problem. I broke it down and organized it. I made a folder. Nothing fancy, just a plain folder with a label. I put my printed timeline inside. I put my notebook pages inside. I put copies of basic records inside. I did not show them to anyone. I did not send them to anyone. I only prepared them like tools laid out before a job. Then I sat back and realized something else. Elena and Ronan still thought I was the same man they could talk over. They still believed I would stay quiet and accept whatever story they wanted to tell. They still believed I would wait for permission to move. I was done waiting for permission. I did not know what the system flag meant yet. I did not know why my records looked slightly off. I did not know who would call me next. But I knew this. If the truth was going to be clarified, it would happen through order, through evidence, and through the same steady patience I used to build my business. And this time, I would not let anyone else speak for me. The next few days moved in a strange rhythm. On the outside, my life still looked small. I still rode the bus. I still bought cheap groceries. I still lived in the basement room with the low ceiling. But inside, everything was getting more structured. I stopped waking up and hoping the day would be easy. I woke up and followed steps. I kept my notebook with me at all times. If a call came in, I wrote the number, the time, and what was said. If I missed a call, I wrote that too. I did not trust memory anymore. Memory is soft. Systems are not. Silas checked in on me each evening. He did not ask me to explain everything again. He only asked what the next step was. When I told him I had a meeting scheduled at a hotel conference floor, his tone changed. He said that sounded like a controlled environment. He said controlled could be good, but it also meant someone had planned how the day would go. He said I should not walk into a planned room without my own structure. I told him I agreed. I met Mara in a small office building downtown. Her office was not fancy, but it was clean and quiet. The chairs were firm, the desk was clear. There were no extra decorations. Everything about the space said she did not waste time. I explained the situation again, but this time I did it from the timeline I had printed. I did not tell it like a story. I told it like a report. I watched her eyes move down the page and pause at the parts that mattered. She asked what I wanted. I told her I wanted the truth confirmed, and I wanted to protect myself from people who might try to twist it. I told her I did not want drama. I told her I wanted a lawful path. Mara said that was the only path that held weight in rooms like the one I was about to enter. She said I should expect careful language, not comfort. She said I should expect people to watch how I react more than what I say. She said my calm was an asset as long as I stayed consistent. She asked about Elena and Ronan. I did not turn it into a speech. I said they had a pattern of taking information and reshaping it. I said they were already probing with questions. I said they were not part of this process, but they might try to attach themselves to it. Mara told me to share nothing with them. She said I could be polite without being open. She said the safest answer was that I was following official steps and could not discuss details. She also said I should prepare for the possibility that they would show up in some way, even if only through messages. Then she put a few papers in front of me. She did not describe them as a big reveal. She described them as simple protections. She said they were normal steps for anyone walking into a high-stakes meeting where identity and compensation might be involved. She said I should not sign anything at the hotel without review. She said I should keep my own notes. She said I should be ready to ask for time if I needed it. I signed what she advised me to sign, but I kept it basic in my mind. I did not think about it as winning or losing. I thought about it as putting guardrails on a road I did not fully see yet. When I left her office, the air outside felt colder. It was not weather. It was the feeling that something was real now. The problem was no longer just a clinic flag and a landlord message. It was a process moving toward a room full of people who did this for a living. That night, Elena called again. I almost did not answer, but I did. I did not want her to claim later that I was hiding. I also did not want her to build a story around my silence. She asked if I was okay. She asked if I needed anything. Then she asked if I was meeting someone important. I kept my voice even. I said I was handling it through the proper channels. I said I did not need help. I said I hoped she was doing well. Elena shifted quickly. She said Ronan was worried about me. She said Ronan wanted to make sure I was not getting taken advantage of. She said Ronan had experience with negotiations and could come with me as support. That offer was not support. It was a hand reaching toward a door that was not his. I told Elena I appreciated the concern, but I would not bring Ronan into it. I said I had legal counsel. I said the meeting was formal and I was following instructions. I kept it simple and repeated it when she tried to steer around it. Elena became quiet. Then she said she did not like being shut out. She said we had history and she deserved to know what was happening. I did not argue. I said history did not give anyone a right to private details. I said I was not shutting her out to punish her. I said I was doing what was necessary. Then I ended the call before it could turn into a fight. 5 minutes later, Ronan sent a message. He wrote like a friendly colleague, not like a man who had taken credit for my work. He said he had heard I was dealing with something complicated. He said he hoped I was okay. He said if I needed a steady hand in a meeting, he could be there. I read it once and did not reply. That was the cleanest answer. The day before the hotel meeting, I went back to my storage unit. The unit was small, but it held pieces of my old life. Tools I no longer used, a few boxes of business documents, a set of framed photos I had not hung since the move. I did not dig through everything. I did not chase emotions. I only collected what fit my rule: confirm, do not guess. I took the worn envelope and placed it inside a plain folder. I added the printed timeline. I added copies of basic records. I added a page with a list of questions I wanted answered, written in simple language. I did not write accusations. I wrote requests for clarification. I wrote questions about the birth year mismatch. I wrote questions about what the system flag meant. I wrote questions about what steps would happen next and who would hold authority. When I was done, I held the folder and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not confidence like a performance, but readiness. Readiness is quiet. It does not need applause. That evening I laid out my clothes on the chair. I chose simple, clean items. Nothing flashy, nothing sloppy. I ironed my shirt carefully again. I trimmed my nails. I checked my shoes. I packed a small bottle of water and a snack. These were small actions, but they were mine. I refused to walk into that room looking like a man who had given up. I also asked Silas if he could come with me to the hotel. Not into the room if it was not allowed, but into the building, just to be present. Not as protection, but as a witness to time and movement. A second set of eyes. A person who would remember details if I missed them. Silas agreed without making it heavy. He said he would meet me in the lobby. He said he would bring a small notebook, too. The morning of the meeting, I rode the bus with the folder in my bag. The streets looked normal. People were going to work, holding travel cups, reading their phones. The city did not care about my meeting. That was fine. I did not need the city to care. I only needed the process to be clear. As the bus approached the hotel district, the buildings grew taller and cleaner. The sidewalks looked newer. The hotel itself was wide and bright, with glass doors and a polished entrance. A doorman stood near the curb. Inside, the lobby smelled like coffee and perfume. Soft music played from speakers hidden in the ceiling. Silas was already there, standing near a pillar. He looked plain and calm, which helped. He nodded when he saw me, and we walked together toward a check-in stand set up near a side corridor. A staff member asked for my name and looked at a list. They did not smile much, but they were polite. They gave me a badge with my name printed on it. They pointed toward an elevator bank that was separated from the main guest elevators by a rope barrier. The separation made it clear that this meeting was not casual. I noticed 2 people in suits standing near the corridor entrance. They were not hotel security in uniform. They looked like private staff, the kind hired to keep things orderly without making a scene. They watched the check-in process with calm faces. Silas and I moved slowly. We did not rush. We did not loiter. We followed directions like people who belonged there. At the elevator, a staff member pressed a button for us. The doors opened, and we stepped inside. The carpet was thick. The lighting was warm. The walls had mirrors that made the space feel larger than it was. I saw my own face reflected and took one slow breath. When we reached the conference floor, the doors opened to a quieter hallway. Signs pointed toward meeting rooms. A table with water bottles sat against one wall. Another staff member waited with a clipboard and checked names again. They told me where to go and where to sit until I was called. Silas was allowed to wait in the hallway seating area, a few chairs away from the room entrance. That was enough. I sat down with my folder on my lap. I kept my hands still. I looked at the closed door in front of me and the simple sign next to it. Nothing about the hallway explained why I was there. It looked like any other business meeting space, but I knew this was different. I could feel it in the careful check-ins, the controlled elevator, the quiet staff, and the way my name had become a line on a list. I did not try to guess what would happen inside that room. I did not try to imagine promises or threats. I focused on what I could control: my posture, my voice, my documents, my timeline, and my calm. Then I waited, not like a man hoping for mercy, but like a man ready to let truth be confirmed the right way. They called my name, and the staff member opened the conference room door like this was a normal business appointment. Inside, the room was bright and quiet. A long table sat in the center. Water bottles were lined up evenly. A small speakerphone sat near the middle like it had been tested twice. Agent Price and Agent Lin were already there. Dr. Keene was seated at the far end with a thin folder. Ms. Calder sat beside two people who looked like legal counsel. Mara sat to my left, calm and still, with her own folder closed in front of her. Elena and Ronan were there too. That was the first moment I felt my stomach tighten. Not because I was scared, because it confirmed what Mara warned me about. They had tried to attach themselves to something they did not understand. Elena looked like she had dressed for a formal photo. Ronan looked like he was ready to lead a meeting he did not own. Both of them tried to act like their presence was normal. Agent Price began by explaining why the meeting existed. He said the clinic's lab system had produced a match that required a specific verification protocol. He said the clinic did the correct thing by pausing the process and escalating the flag. He said this was not about medical results, and it was not about a crime accusation. He said it was about identity confirmation tied to a high-profile missing child file. Then he said, my biological profile matched a file created 43 years ago. He said the case involved a family with significant resources and a long history of ongoing search efforts. He said the system showed a discrepancy between the birth year on my records and the birth year associated with the file. He said this mismatch was part of why the case stayed unresolved for so long. I kept my face neutral. I did not speak fast. I only told him I understood and asked what steps were required to confirm it properly. Agent Lin explained the steps in plain terms. She said they needed to confirm chain of custody, lab standards, and documentation history. She said they also needed to resolve the record discrepancy. She said that meant reviewing my early childhood paperwork and comparing it to the file. That was when Mara opened her folder for the first time. She did not do it with drama. She did it like a professional laying out materials for a review. She provided my timeline and the documents I had kept. She explained that I had lived my whole life under one identity and had never had a reason to suspect a mismatch. She also noted that external verification had already reached my housing office, which showed how quickly the process can spread if it is not handled carefully. Dr. Keene confirmed, in his calm medical tone, that the clinic followed protocol and that the flag was not created by clinic staff. He said the software integration triggered it automatically and required escalation. Ms. Calder then spoke. She said her role was to represent the family's interests and to make sure the process stayed respectful and lawful. She said the family did not want a public spectacle. She said if confirmation was completed, the family intended to provide support through structured legal channels, including identity restoration costs, secure housing assistance, and a financial package tied to a long-established foundation. Ronan leaned forward like he wanted to speak, but Mara lifted a hand slightly, and he stopped. The gesture was small, but it changed the room. It reminded everyone who was authorized to speak for me. Elena tried next. She said she was there because we had history, and she wanted to help me navigate the situation. She said she knew how to handle complicated social issues. Agent Price shut that down without raising his voice. He said this was not a social issue. He said this was a controlled verification process, and only necessary parties would be included. Then Mara did something I did not expect her to do so quickly. She said that because Elena and Ronan had inserted themselves into this meeting, it was important to clarify boundaries on the record. She stated that Elena was not my representative. She stated that Ronan was not my business partner anymore in any capacity that allowed him access to my private matters. Ronan's face shifted. He tried to smile, but it did not hold. Mara then placed additional documents on the table. She explained that, separate from this verification process, my former business collapse involved misrepresentation and unauthorized control of contracts. She explained that we had already initiated lawful steps to correct ownership and representation with key parties. She did not attack Ronan. She only described actions and dates. Agent Lin asked a few questions and took notes. Ms. Calder's counsel exchanged a look with Agent Price, the kind of look that says a situation has just become clearer. Ronan tried to speak again. He said he had only ever tried to keep the business afloat. He said he had done what he thought was necessary. Mara responded with one sentence. She said necessity does not rewrite signatures, and it does not erase documented roles. Elena went quiet. Her posture changed. She stopped looking like she was attending something glamorous. She looked like someone realizing she had walked into a room where image did not work. Agent Price returned the focus to me. He asked if I understood what confirmation would mean. He said it could lead to a formal restoration process and a legal resolution with the family involved. He said it could also lead to corrections in my records, including the birth year discrepancy. I told him I understood. I told him I wanted it handled properly, with no shortcuts. Ms. Calder said the family's support offer would only move forward after confirmation. She said if it was confirmed, their team would coordinate with my counsel, so the process stayed structured and private. At the end of the meeting, a staff member brought in a sign-out sheet and a procedural schedule. Agent Lin explained the next appointments and who would contact me. It was the first time in years that people with authority spoke to me like I mattered. In the hallway outside, Ronan moved closer and tried to speak to me like we were still on the same side. Mara stepped between us without touching him and told him all communication would go through counsel. She said it with the same calm tone she used for everything else. Later that afternoon, we stopped by the old warehouse office. Not to argue, not to prove anything.